Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to our podcast. And today we're going to talk about temporary employees. So I'd like to get started and define what is a temp employee. So basically, it's a contracted worker who's hired for a short-term job. And basically, the United States Department of Labor would define a temp employee as somebody hired for work for 1 year or less with a specific end date. And sometimes it lasts a couple of days to a couple of weeks, but basically it has limitations of how long it could be for. So when you hire temp employees, you have procedures such as hiring like a full-time employee, and you will pretty much incur similar costs such as hiring, training. You have to pay the Social Security and Medicare contributions, but you could avoid such perks as vacation time, paid holidays, and sick time, again, depending on the agreement. And another thing that I was kind of thinking that a lot of times when you hire a temp employee, some of the benefits of working with a staffing agency could be helping employers long term. For example, some of this for when you hire a temp employee, you might actually end up paying a little bit more to cover the staffing agency fee, but it will give you a little bit more flexibility. For example, the employee might not be the best fit for the position, and you could almost right away get a replacement or say, well, I'm sorry, this is not working out, and you're going to be actually dealing with the staffing agency themselves. But I did want to ask Irene about some of the things that she might have seen and some of the precautions that the employer should be taking when they're hiring a temp employee.
Oh, absolutely. So I'll actually start with the agencies because that's what you were just talking about. And that's where most of my precautions are going to come from. And it's going to be across the board. First, of course, as always, as I always say, make sure you have everything in writing, both with the agency as well as with the employee. It's very important. We've seen a lot of times the company thinks that they're paying about the same. So they're paying at the minimum wage or a bit more, for example. And so they think that that's normal, but I always urge them to make sure that the agency's agreement with the employee as well as how they're paying the employee is proper and it at least accounts for minimum wage as well as overtime. Because if you're paying the agency near or at minimum wage, you have to wonder, they're probably making some money off of it, and you have to wonder, does this mean that they're violating minimum wage and other laws? If they are, that will directly be the liability of the company. And the agency, even if they give you a statement that says that the employee is theirs and they will cover for anything, regardless, under certain laws, uh, including federal laws, the company may still be responsible and may still very much be on the hook. So definitely something to watch out for. Likewise, also with agencies, you need to make sure that in the agreement or in any communications with the employee that they send in, that they didn't promise them any sort of benefits or any specific overtime, health insurance, and so on that the company actually does not offer. And then also to make sure that the uh, temp agency did not agree or isn't paying the employee on a 1099, that's going to be very important as well, because likely the company is paying the temp agency a 1099 and a regular check, but the temp agency would need to be paying the employee a W-2. Now, if the way that the payments work is that the temp employee would be sent over to the company pays them directly, then likely, and of course should all be reviewed, but pretty good chance if they're doing work in the ordinary course of business or they're filling in for somebody that they're not actually a 1099, that they're most likely going to be an employee and a W-2 employee in that. And that actually brings me into that probationary versus temp employee. The reason why that comes up so often is because they're pretty similar. Sometimes you have the right to keep a temp employee and convert their status into a full-time employee. And same goes for the probationary employees. And so it seems that some of the points that we bring up are the same. However, the way that the temp employee came to the company, the benefits offered, the way that they're paid could have been different because of certain other agreements that the temp employee may have with the temp agency that they came from. And likewise, also, as Jane had mentioned, certain benefits that may be already available to probationary employees during that initial time period may not be available to temp employees, which is why it's so important that all of this is documented, because you can't just assume that they're interchangeable and that you called you called it a probationary period for a new employee and that would cover all of the temp employees as well. It's really important that is most certainly in all of the contracts and agreements. What else I would say is that temp employees, especially if they're covered by the company, but even if you are paying a temp agency, or even if this is through a recruiter and so on, should still be covered by workers' compensation, disability, unemployment insurance, and they should still have coverage if they're an employee and they're part of the company, even if it's for a short period of time, even if they're filling in, their statuses would likely, and again, as we always have that disclaimer, everything should be reviewed individually, just because so much of it depends on the real relationship with the person. But pretty good chance that they'll be classified as an employee, especially in a state like New York. And in that case, they should be covered as an employee under workers' compensation, disability, unemployment insurance, and so on. We see this come up very often, and we see a lot of our companies, a lot of our clients get into trouble specifically with agencies, which is why I spent a little bit more time discussing some of the warnings and some of the possible pitfalls with any temp agencies or hiring agencies, recruiters, especially if you're going to be making payments directly through them. Very important that you have all the paperwork down, very important you've checked everything, did all the due diligence, and you really make sure that the proper classification of the individual, whether it's going to be employee most likely, or perhaps independent contractor, that the way that you've classified them, the benefits you've made available, will be consistent throughout the way that the company treats the individual and that employee independent contractor, as well as the way that the agency does as well. And as always, if you have any questions for us about temp employees, probationary employees, or any other questions at all, feel free to reach out to Jane or I. Thank you so much.
Thank you.